Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what are some of your most memorable cases? I work for a mortgage company and occasionally we have to review divorce decrees if someone is divorcing to remove a spouse's name from the loan. There is a notorious case known around my pretty large department as the cat divorce decree account. In this divorce decree, there is a 5-page addendum specifically regarding Mittens and Buttons Johnson. Names changed for their protection. Memorable clauses included mandatory 10-minute Skype sessions weekly, no unsupervised playdates with children under 15, and that their claws be trimmed every 3 days. Not divorce related but still interesting. When a local couple died, their will indicated that their house and sizable fortune would remain in trust, managed by family friends, until their several cats died of natural causes. The odd thing is, it's been over 20 years now, and the cats are still alive. Also, they've changed color. Last sentence made me roll. When I was an assistant, I was involved with a PFA, protection from abuse, proceeding for a divorcing couple. The allegation was that the husband sent his brother a Facebook message that said, "Somebody's about to get Ray-riced. Looks pretty bad, right?" Well, both the husband and the brother get on the stand and explain that they were talking about their mother. They said that, ever since they were kids, when their mom would yell at them, they would say crap like, "Mom, you're about to get rock bottomed, or you keep it up and you're gonna get a stone cold stunner." Mind you, these guys were, at the time of this hearing, in their late 20s. It was all I could do to keep from laughing. I was just picturing the kids from Talladega Nights the whole time. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but when I was at a mediation a few months ago, the mediator was telling me about a divorce he mediated a few years back. It was your classic rich guy is sick of his wife and kids, and wants a divorce to run off with a young, hot piece of butt. His wife wanted blood. She came to the mediation with some pretty outrageous demands about the money and property she'd receive. The mediator pushed hard throughout a long day of mediation, but she hadn't budged an inch. Finally, very late in the day, the husband threw up his hands and said, "Frick it, give her everything she's asking for and let's be done with it." The mediator went back to the wife's conference room to share the good news that the husband had caved in, and she flipped the frick out, glowing incandescent with rage at the idea that her husband was willing to pay truly insane compensation to be done with her and ride off with his little girlfriend. She was emotionally invested in the fight, and the hubby eventually dismissed it, and her, as not worth his time. I can understand her rage. Divorce lawyer here. I've never had anything too crazy. The worst I can think of is representing my client who had to be transported from the jail for, allegedly, violating the restraining order between the two. There was another one that was technically a dissolution of domestic partnership, not a divorce, but essentially the same thing for never married parties. That was fairly crazy. Client alleged her ex had killed a man and reported it to the police, but I guess they never found the body. Also alleged his attorney was sleeping with him. One of my co-workers had a case where the ex was awarded the couple's dog in the divorce only to have it euthanized just so the other would suffer more. I don't care how bad your relationship is, there is no excuse for that. That pee me off to hear about. A friend who is a lawyer told me a pretty crazy story about a wealthy couple splitting up. The woman hid millions of dollars overseas and cut up all her husband's clothing with a pair of scissors. These shenanigans caused her to get almost nothing. Misreporting assets is the worst thing you can do in a divorce, and unless you have Swiss citizenship and a Swiss bank account you will fail 99% of the time and lose so much more than your 50/50 split. Prenup up and disclose people. Family law paralegal here. One time we worked really hard on a woman's case because her husband had gotten on a bus to Mexico with her kids. We expedited everything. I went above and beyond for this woman, contacting attorneys in the deep south of MX and writing out very clear instructions to get back her kids. It turns out our client had stabbed her husband because he confronted her about sleeping with his brother. The husband packed up and took the kids. The child, a 10-year-old girl, of my father client thanked me after the custody battle against the out-of-control alcoholic mother. The court awarded full physical and legal custody to the father. The child said to me that I was a lawyer for kids. I never forgot the compliment. That was 30 years ago. Here's a not divorced one, but it's pretty good. Husband and wife are from a culture where you simply do not divorce. They have a few kids. He moves on and dates a woman for nearly 20 years, and they also have a kid together. He does all and tells no one how it is set up other than there is a trust. The guy dies. He made a trust for his entire estate. He designated that his kids would each be beneficiaries with equal percent interest, but also gave his girlfriend 1% more than his wife. She was also named as executor of the estate and trustee for the trust. Popcorn was had. Middle Eastern, 100%. My father did divorce law for many years. We were in Virginia Beach for a tournament I was in with a friend of mine and his father. This is back around '07. My dad got a call from a forensic accountant he hired to track down some accounts his client knew her husband stashed money in. He was asked to pull over and to put him on speaker because he would not believe what he was about to tell him. The accountants traced all of his money to 3 bank accounts totaling over $300 million in another country. My friend's father screamed. My father dropped his phone and there were numerous WTF from the back seat. My father's client made out with 2 of the 3 accounts and they walked away silently. He was paid in full, given a small bonus and has never heard from her again. After college I worked in a law firm dealing with family law and have a ton of stories. 1. At one time we had almost a dozen cases of high military personnel going through divorces because their wives came out of the closet after all their children grew up. 2. We had a client who was wealthy, but going through a divorce cause she was going crazy. She dressed like a homeless person, smelled like crap, and once I delivered a copy of her husband's Discover to her and her house looked like a dump. I literally thought she was gonna kill me and bury me under the piles and piles of crap in her place. She also kept harassing her husband and his girlfriend, vandalizing the car, writing W on the door of the condo, etc. We had to drop her as a client after she kept disobeying her attorney, etc. 3. We had a wealthy client who married a girl he met during tango classes and they had a child. He spent over $500,000 fighting for custody and she kept accusing him of physically shaming their daughter to try and win, etc. Each side hired psychologists and experts and in the end, it didn't matter if it wasn't the truth. The mother kept telling the girl she was abused and the experts said it was gonna damage her regardless. He eventually won partial custody. After 2 years of working there, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer and I don't want to get married. Haha. Not a divorce lawyer but a child of divorce. Happened when I was about 6 or 7. I'm 18 now. I learned this about a year ago. My mother often likes to talk about how my father didn't offer any financial assistance during the divorce and his involvement was purely selfish. And a common thing she's told me is that he's never paid for my schooling, which is true post-divorce. However, what I learned was that during the divorce he offered to pay for half of all of my school fees. She instead chose child support, which he has paid for every year. She also took all of their combined savings out and into my 6 years old at the time bank account, which my father had no access to. This meant when showing bank statements, my father had more money than my mother. I've lost some respect for her since then. Korean divorce story here. My friend wanted a divorce from his wife. Now one thing about Korean divorce law is there is no alimony or anything. It's also fairly male friendly, especially if no kids are involved. There can be settlements where a party has to pay X amount or whatever. The only way a spouse can get a guaranteed sum of money is if the spouse increase the net worth of the other spouse. So let's say you're a wife and you marry your husband who has a small company. With your involvement the husband grows the company from $50,000 a year to $5 million. Well, you can sue your husband for a portion of that $5 million. Anyway, my friend married his wife. They were married for 4 years and things just weren't working out. So he moved out and they started the divorce process. My friend was a good man and continued to support her throughout the process, paid her rent and her bills. The wife was greedy though. My friend had offered her $20,000 as a one-time settlement. This was a huge chunk of money to him. The wife angrily demanded $30,000 and would refuse to budge. They went to court. Their cases were presented. The husband said he was willing to give the woman $20,000 in return for a divorce. The wife demanded $30,000 as compensation. The lawyers argued that the husband had gone above and beyond with supporting his wife even after separation and it was unfair to demand more. The judge asked the woman if she would accept $20,000. The woman replied no. The judge said then it will be $0. Divorce is finalized. Stamp done. My buddy walked out of the courthouse. Then the wife attacked him. My friend filed assault charges against her and successfully won a $3,000 judgment from her. TLD, our wife got greedy, ended up losing her $20,000 offer and paying the husband $3,000. I had a client that was being sued by her baby's daddy for custody and child support. He had a weapons charge and drug charge on his recent record. My client, the mother, was clean. During cross-examine I asked about those charges and asked if he was subjected to a test, would he pass? He answered in the affirmative. The judge, upon request from counsel, me, had the sheriff's office administer a test for both. He, the father, failed. My client, the mother, passed. Judge awarded my client custody and child support. It isn't that interesting, but what makes it funny is this was my first family law case, and opposing counsel was a very well-known and tough family law attorney. Prior to our hearing, opposing counsel came in and she literally demanded we agree to her client's terms or else she, my client, would never see the kid again. I offered that her client, the father, get weekends, etc. standard visitation schedule. She declined and her client failed the drug test administered after the hearing. My client passed. That's pretty minor, but it was a pretty cool win for a young attorney up against a big name. She also left me a voicemail congratulating me for kicking her butt at the hearing and called me a humble son of a bee for presenting our offer considering our knowledge of the drug and weapons charge. All for naught since the clients ended up back together a year and a half later. Imagine that. I think a lot of confusion comes from the fact a woman attorney was representing a father suing the mother for custody and support. I am guessing everyone confused had their mind bent by the gender designations. Love knows no bounds, or common sense. Not a lawyer, but I have a funny story from a wine storage place. Guy rents out a storage spot in this wine storage center, temperature controlled. What's odd is he rents out this huge space and slowly over the next several months begins filling it with cases of very expensive hard to obtain wine. Owner of storage place asks if he is moving, downsizing, or why he needs so much space. Guy tells him he's swapping wine out of his cellar and replacing it with cheap wine. He was planning on filing for divorce. Wife knew about basement collection but had no idea what was in it or how much it cost. He knew she was going to be vindictive, cheating, and would want the wine. He was happy to give it all away. Divorcee, not a lawyer but I remember the blank stare from the lawyer. I was paying $250 an hour to handle my case with my husband when I told him our biggest marital asset was our $10,000 Magic the Gathering card collection. My client, husband, was living in same house as wife throughout proceedings. He'd call me and complain about things like, his wife ate a bag of chips and didn't go to the store to replace it. His wife invited one of her friends over who he hated. His wife marathon TV shows on Netflix instead of fixing dinner. And numerous complaints about wife's lack of a moral compass. And he paid me $250 per hour for all that shiz. When a client refuses to settle and notes that it's the principle of the thing, lawyers get rich, and the client needlessly bankrupts him or herself. Stupid. My wife worked family law for the state. Sometimes it was divorce. Sometimes it was child support enforcement. She was in court nearly every day. She saw some crap. She is now stay at home with our sons but she had a story nearly every day. There were a few phrases that stand out like someone representing themselves in a custody battle and shouting, "So you're saying it's not true you finger banged that lady with our kid in the house." Those were fun. But mostly I remember how depressing some situations are with low income divorces and child support battles. There were women seeking child support from someone who had 8 other kids from 5 different moms. This person worked a minimum wage job bouncing to a different job each month to avoid wage garnishment. The end result, even if successful, would have been about $15 a month in this situation. This crap happened all the time. Then you had people actually working to screw the state over. People who get divorced and go on state aid. The husband still lives at home supporting the wife, kid having his wages garnished right back into a checking account they share for all intents and purposes. My grandfather went through a pretty high stakes divorce about 10 years ago. He founded a consulting firm in 1994 that ended up being worth several $1,000,000. He was married to his second wife, not my grandmother, who was his first wife whom he divorced in the 80s when he founded it. She is an executive for a large health and beauty product company. They were both very successful. When they divorced, they had been living in a very large house in an exclusive neighborhood in an affluent southern suburb. She got the house and kept her wealth that she had amassed from her company. But that wasn't it. She also wanted 51% of my grandfather's company. She didn't win that in court because she had already won more than half of the assets. I doubt my grandfather really gave a frick about that, but I could be wrong. He just wanted to keep his company, which already made him plenty of money. Things got interesting after they separated. She allegedly hired a private investigator to stalk my grandfather. Yes, stalk. We found a tracking device attached to his car. No bulls. He moved into an apartment for a while during the divorce proceedings. She and her lawyer eventually went to his apartment to take pictures of everything he owned. He obviously let them into his apartment. They even opened up his fridge and took pictures of the inside of his fridge. My grandfather eventually started dating somebody else. Yes, at around age 60. He likes women, and the ex-wife would call my grandfather's house and talk to her, trying to appear friendly or something. It was just a very strange situation. It was even stranger for me. I had grown up with her sort of as my grandmother. I never knew she wasn't my actual grandmother until I met my dad's actual mom at age 7. I didn't meet my father until age 6. Mind you, it was kind of confusing until the divorce. But during and after the divorce, my grandfather's ex would call my mother to ask to take me out to dinner, and movies, and things like that. I remember seeing Star Wars Episode 3 in theaters with her. I didn't find it strange or anything. She had known me since I was born and served as a grandmotherly figure. However, my father hated her. I heard a lot of stories of the crazy crap she did to him when my dad was a teenager. I haven't talked to her for several years. I much prefer my actual grandmother. Divorce is strange. Seeing how easily it can tear families apart and frick over individuals. I'm definitely doing a prenup when if I get married. You never know. Unless she owned the vehicle or it was also in her name, it would be highly illegal for them to put a tracking device on his car. I'm not a lawyer but was in a painful divorce. I had my ex stand up before the judge and say, also, there is this item on his credit card from strip joint, and I had to look it up and I think it's a strip club. Since we were representing ourselves, I got the judge's attention and he let me speak. My response, Your Honor, she knows what the item is about because she was there that night and even got a lap dance from another lady. There were woo and I ate a few chuckles from the peanut gallery and the judge had this quiet hidden little grin that vanished quickly. It felt awesome to say because I'd been fricked over so much from the divorce. It was crappy. Not a divorce lawyer, but I am a CPS investigator and a lot of my cases are spite case called in by a spiteful ex that thinks CPS is the cheap way to obtain custody. Don't do this. Just get a lawyer and stop wasting my time. This happened to my sister. Her daughter was born with Mongolian spots, I think is what they are called, which are like purple birthmarks on the back of her neck. When her dad decided he wanted custody, after not having anything to do with her, he took her to the hospital during his visitation and claimed they were bruises. My sister was livid. I gotta say, reading these makes me happy that my parents were so civil during their divorce. My dad got the kids most of the time because he could better afford to take care of us. Mom pretty much got half of the house's worth and some of dad's retirement fund. Both walked away and are still able to be around each other without fighting. So I call that a win. I saw a mother and father live together and fight over the location of the Xbox and Wii. The games were in the family living room. The father took the games from the living room and put them in his bedroom. The children then spent all the time in the father's bedroom. The mother literally went to court to obtain an order that the Xbox and Wii be returned to the living room. They spent thousands on this. So my dad's a divorce lawyer and doesn't usually talk about his work, but he did tell me one story. He had a client who was a trucker and wanted to divorce his wife. My dad describes this guy as the embodiment of a late 40s, 300 pounds, gentle sir, neckbird, red pill kinda guy. The man tells my dad a narrative about how he and his wife are in an open marriage, but she refuses to have another partner, even though this man has multiple partners. He also casually mentions to my dad that he is a bi, but wanted to make it very clear that he prefers women, but has fricked men regularly. It's worth noting that my dad is as straight edge, old fashioned as they come. Imagine Hank Hilbert from Georgia. So the guy tells my dad that he wants to divorce his wife. He doesn't say why at first. Dad asks him why, and he tells him a story about his last trucking, or whatever it's called. This guy was out in his truck on a run, and it's his 49th birthday. Since he was alone at a truck stop on his birthday, his wife gets her husband a prostitute. Now remember how I said this guy's bi? She gets him a gigolo. So this man and this male H are getting it on in his big rig. The guy tells my dad, in graphic detail, that the male H bit his dong while he was getting a BJ, and that it hurt so much he punched the prostitute, kicked him out of the truck, and immediately called his wife saying he wanted a divorce for hiring a prostitute that would do such a thing. My dad said he's never had to try harder to keep a straight face and be professional, but the guy ended up being a great client. Great client to my dad means he actually paid. Dad says a lot of divorce clients lose the divorce and end up not paying the lawyer. TL. Dr. £300 neck but wants a divorce because his wife hired him a male H that bit his dong. My Hank Hill-esque dad tried not to laugh at him. He was really hungry for the D. My father-in-law was an attorney. He represented a husband in a divorce and the discussion about division of assets was so petty it included fighting over partially used boxes of grocery items. When the couple refused to compromise over a half-eaten box of cereal, the judge lost it and said he was going to make a summary judgment and exclude the couple because they were wasting the court's time. My uncle, a doctor, knew his marriage was close to ending and explained to his soon-to-be ex that after a discussion with his parents he was now financially successful, he would repay them their out-of-pocket costs for his medical school etc, which in the 80s they had. Fully cash paid, no aid or scholarships, well over $100k, which they then held until after the divorce and gave back to him as a safety deposit box of cashed checks. That wouldn't work, either. Any lawyer worth his salt would get the money back. Back when I was in law school I was a clerk for a judge that heard a lot of divorce cases. The craziest one involved a gambling addict. The guy would write ridiculous checks to the local casino, $20k, $30k, even $100k plus, all the time. The wife admitted to going with him to the casino each time, but said she only played the penny slots and had no idea he was spending that much money. Because they were splitting the remaining assets, that was still substantial. She wanted the money he spent at the casino to count against him so she would get a whole lot more. While there were copies of the checks, it was his word against hers as to whether she knew about them and whether she was also playing the high stakes games. The husband said she knew and she played the high stakes games too. I remember the oral hearing was the last week that I worked there, so I never heard how it turned out. I do, however, remember the judge thinking they were both lying, which all good judges always believe. Seems like the casino would have records on such things. They track their high rollers pretty well. So he is doing this case back in the early 90s. He is representing the wife and the case has been ugly. Both sides were cheating before the divorce, and a guy's P that his wife filed since they were both cheating. So they are doing the case, going to court and mediating who gets the house, cars, money and that BS, and the guy is a real butthole about everything. Wife is too, my pops says. Just a real ugly divorce. So it's getting to the boil point and the husband says to my dad and his client, I'm going to kill this bee and right after I kill her I am going to come kill you, pointing at my dad. That same night, he went to her house, shot her killing her, and was on his way to our house to I guess kill my dad when he got pulled over. Cop thought he was drunk. He was, arrested him for DUI. Later he went to prison for murdering his wife. I thought that was the craziest one of his divorce stories. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.